All right, next up on the agenda is Episode 3 of Reload, Retool, and Rebuild. If you have not seen the first 2 episodes, please go and check those out right now. The first episode, I focused on the Phoenix Suns, who have had a fantastic start to the year, and I focused in Episode 2 on the Miami Heat, who have also had a fairly decent start to the season. In Episode 3, we will be focusing on the Los Angeles Clippers. If you are a little bit unfamiliar with how this works, so what I do is I look at the roster, I look at some pros and some cons and the financial situation of each and every team that I do. Obviously today it will be the Clippers, and what I do is at the very end I take all that into consideration and then I give a doctor's diagnosis as to whether that team in the off-season should reload, retool, or rebuild. Just to give some clarification, what it means to reload is to essentially bring the exact same team as you have this year back next year. Maybe make some minor changes with a couple of role players, but really that is about it. Otherwise, you are bringing the exact same core back, and you're going to try after it and get after it again next year. To retool means you're taking maybe one of your stars and you're swapping it out with another, or you're taking several really important and prominent players on your team and you are swapping them out for other important and prominent players on your team, and you are trying to go after it in a different way. Best example I can give to you was last year with the Boston Celtics. Obviously, it ended up with a championship. They took Marcus Smart out. They took Robert Williams out. They added Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday. That kind of is the way it goes. And then, obviously, we all know what rebuild means. That means that you blow it up, you trade your stars away, you trade your role players away, you get draft picks, you start all over, you rebuild, and you hopefully can, be good in, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, however long it takes for you to hit on those draft picks and then start over from there. So, like I said, that's what we are going to do today. So let's start with the roster for the Los Angeles Clippers. So we're going to go position by position here. I'm going to start out by saying that this is one of the deepest teams in the NBA, if not the very deepest teams in the NBA in terms of overall talent, top to bottom, and the point guard position is a perfect representation of that. Now, these names are not necessarily in any particular order, obviously. I do try to obviously put the starters or projected starters up front. So we got James Harden. We all know James Harden, what he is. We all know what he isn't at this point in his career. One of the best players of this generation. In his prime, he was arguably the most efficient and potent offensive weapon the NBA has ever seen, and honestly, the numbers support that. I know that seems ridiculous to say at times, but he was dropping 50-point triple-doubles every single night for like a 3-month stretch during his career, and then obviously for a good 7 years he was, dropping, 29 to 35 points a night, 9 assists, 9 rebounds every single night. It was absurd to look at his prime. Kevin Porter Jr., a guy that I don't really know what the role is going to be on this team for him. This is a guy that obviously has a troubled past, right? He was released or traded away, whatever it was, from the Houston Rockets because of disciplinary issues, because he was arrested. It was just a whole mess. So I don't know what he will become, but he is young. He was talented in Houston, so maybe the LA Clippers can find something in him. Bones Highland. So this is another young, fun guard. He's kind of not really gotten a whole lot better since he got into the NBA. I like Bones Highland a lot. I think he can be solid, but I'm just not sure how much run he's really going to get on this team. And then there's Chris Dunn, who they brought over this offseason. A guy who has just clung into the NBA, right? I mean, this is a guy that has survived. He was really labeled a huge bust coming out of the draft. I believe he was drafted 5th overall at one point as just a defensive young guard. He was famously traded away as part of the Jimmy Butler trade. He was traded from Minnesota to Chicago, and it just didn't really work out for him in Chicago. He's bounced around the league a little bit, but he's always been known for his defense, and he's gotten a little bit better as a shooter as well as the years have gone on, so he's been able to hang on in the NBA, and I see that this is a nice fit. This is a guy that obviously they need some defense on this team, and Chris Dunn fits that bill quite well. Okay, moving on to shooting guard. So this is a bit of a weird situation. Honestly, the entirety of the starting lineup is a bit of a weird situation. So I'm going to put Norman Powell here at the 2. I do believe typically he is listed at the 3. It just depends on whether Terrence Mann is starting at the 2 or if Norman Powell is starting at the 2. So what I went ahead and did was I actually put Norman Powell at the 2, which I think is his more natural position because I am going out of the way to say that Kawhi Leonard in this circumstance will be starting if he is at full health. So I think that what they would do is they would move Norman Powell to the 2, they would move Derrick Jones Jr. to the 3, they would have Kawhi Leonard at the 4, and then obviously Ivica Zubac at the 5. So regardless, Norman Powell, he's had a fantastic start to the year. He is a guy that I don't remember if he actually won Sixth Man of the Year or not, or if he just came real close, but he's been a phenomenal bench weapon for the last 3 to 4 years. He's a guy that can go out there and score you 25, 30 points a night if you let him, if you give him the opportunities, and he can score 15 points at the drop of a hat anytime he wants. So this is a great scorer, a really, really valuable player for them, especially for when guys like Kawhi Leonard or guys like James Harden or formerly guys like Paul George were to go down with some sort of injury. He would step up, kind of fill in more of that offensive juggernaut role to keep them afloat. Terrence Mann is a guy that is a really, really fun player. He's kind of that stereotypical 3-and-D guy, is a great defender, is a pretty good three-point shooter, but just doesn't really do a whole lot else, right? He's not really a great playmaker. He's not a fantastic rebounder, but he is, again, a valuable guy that can slide into that starting lineup, or he's a great piece off the bench, regardless of his role. He does well. And then Cam Christie, don't really know much about Cam Christie, but he provides that depth. Obviously, if Norman Powell or Terrence Mann were to go down, this is a guy who is on a guaranteed contract for the Clippers, so they obviously see something in him in order to keep him around. They're not, they're not giving him some kind of non-guaranteed deal. So obviously they see something in him, so we'll see how the season rolls for Cam Christie. At the small forward position, this is definitely the thinnest of the groups here. So Derrick Jones Jr., a piece very important that they brought in the offseason, obviously had a great year last year with the Mavericks, really revitalized his career. Obviously, he's always been a very rangy, a very athletic defensive player, but last year he showcased his ability to hit, at the very least, the corner three, which is the most important shot in the NBA at this point. And again, he's very athletic. He can finish lobs very well. He's a great defender, both on the perimeter and in the interior because of his athleticism. So this is a very valuable piece for the Clippers, again, especially if somebody like Kawhi Leonard goes down with injury. Amir Coffey is a guy that, again, another one of those bench guys that I don't know a whole lot about. If you stick him and you had to give him 10 minutes, 12 minutes a night, I'm sure it wouldn't hurt you too bad, but it's not something that you really go around wishing that you have to do. So again, no disrespect to anybody on these teams, but Amir Coffey is not somebody that I'm hoping, if he's on my team, he's playing more than a few minutes a night. When healthy, this is the easiest position for me to look at and say, yes, this is the strength of the team. This is by far the deepest position that they have, other than maybe point guard. Point guard's deeper, I think, top to bottom, and this is the best group that they have. So Kawhi Leonard, we all know, again, kind of similar to James Harden, right? We all know what Kawhi Leonard is. We all know what Kawhi Leonard is not at this point. Kawhi Leonard, when healthy, is one of the 10 best players in the NBA. I don't even know if that's something that's thrown around as controversial. Maybe it is now because we've barely seen him play for the last 5 years, it feels like, since the COVID year. But when he is healthy, he is absolutely fantastic. He very much deserves to be an all-NBA player if he is healthy pretty much every year just by default. But the problem is what Kawhi Leonard is not, is he is just not a guy that you can count on to be healthy for more than a few games a year. He can't really play back-to-backs at this point. He can't really play for long stretches at a time. This is a guy that has worn down quite a bit over the years. And it's sad because he's a great player. He's obviously a champion. He knows how to lead teams. He's a multi-time champion. And unlike a lot of great players in the NBA today, he's a two-way guy. This isn't a guy that just goes out there and scores 35 points a night and drops 9 assists and gets a bunch of rebounds and fills the stat sheet and then doesn't play defense like a Luka Doncic or somebody like that, right? No offense to Luka or anything like that, but that's kind of what Luka is. We saw it last year in the playoffs, right? He didn't really play much defense when the finals rolled around. Kawhi Leonard's not that guy. He makes his living on the defensive end, and so he's so much fun to watch on both ends of the floor if he's healthy. He just is never healthy, and that obviously is rolling into this year as well. He didn't play in the Olympics because he wasn't healthy, and now he's missing the start of the season because he still wasn't healthy, even though obviously he had the whole offseason to not get injured because they took him off the Olympic team. So it's just been a mess. I don't know how much longer Kawhi Leonard has, not only on the Clippers, but just in the NBA in general if this continues. Hopefully, at some point, he catches a break and he can finally start getting some consistent playing time, but we'll see. Nicholas Batum, another guy that came over, I do believe last season in the trade for, I think with the James Harden trade, actually, he came over from the Sixers, and he went over to the Sixers, and now he's back. Excuse me, I don't know if I said that correctly, so let me start that over here. Nicholas Batum was on the Clippers, was traded to the Sixers last year, and now he is back on the Clippers again to try to get some more depth. He's a great player. I think that he's one of those guys that's had a bad reputation for a lot of his career because he got a big contract in Charlotte and he stunk. I mean, there's no other way around it. He stunk. He did not live up to the contract at all, but he's done a great job over the last 6 to 7 years of finding a niche in the NBA, bouncing around, not being afraid to take lesser minutes in a lesser role, and he's a guy that, at least as a Celtics fan, I don't like facing. I mean, he's a guy that is a really long, rangy defender on the perimeter and on the interior, and a guy that can step out and hit threes. He's a good 3-and-D player at this point in his career, and so he's great depth for them. PJ Tucker, the ageless wonder. PJ Tucker is still hanging around, still making, I think, $11 million a year, which is insane. Maybe that contract ended last year. I don't remember. But, I mean, he was really making like $11 or $12 million every single year to really not do much. So, good for you, PJ Tucker. But anyway, he's a great leader. I mean, he always has been on really good teams. He's been on a lot of playoff teams. Obviously, he hoped that the Clippers would have been a playoff team last year. It just didn't end up. They were, obviously. It just didn't end up working out for them in the playoffs against the Mavs. So he's been a part of a lot of playoff teams over the years. So this is a guy who we know what he is. We know what he is not. He is a guy that's not going to give you much on the offensive end. He's grown into being a better shooter, but he really lives in the corners. He's not really an above the arc kind of guy or above the break kind of guy in terms of three-pointers. You're not going to see him taking a lot of wing or top of the key threes. You're going to see him standing in the corner. He's not really going to post up much. He's not really going to cut to the basket and dunk. He's not going to do much, but he is a really, really tenacious and really, really ferocious defender. And so he's a lot of fun to watch. I would love a guy like him on the Celtics, but obviously he is on the Clippers. And then Kobe Brown. Young guy, drafted just a couple of years ago. Don't really know much about him. I don't know what his role in this team will be. Obviously, with Kawhi Leonard out of the lineup, he has a better chance of getting out there, but I'm not really sure what that role is going to be for him so far this season, and what his future will be in Los Angeles. And last but not least, the big men of the group. So Ivica Zubac is a guy that I like him a lot, right? Ivica Zubac is a guy that I really, really like watching play. I think he's a really fun offensive center. He just cannot defend the interior. He just can't. It's not his strength. He's never really gotten better at that. He kind of, the way I describe it is like I don't know. It's like a super cheesy, vulgar, I'm going to write everything out and give it a standard thing for everybody comedian. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever been to a comedy club where, there's comedians that, they tell all the local jokes and they gear up with the crowd, and then you go see them, 3 states away, and they're doing a whole different set for that place, and they just are prepared every single night, and their material is a little different every night. And then you got that one comic that just says the exact same jokes the exact same way over and over again. And you know what? Maybe they're really, really funny. Maybe they're excellent, and that's why he's saying it that way. But that kind of comedian gets to a kind of niche really quickly, and gets to their potential really quickly and then stays there and does not move. And that's kind of Ivica Zubac to me. He is a guy that got really quickly to a place where he was a good offensive center. You knew exactly what he was. He was going to be great in the post. He's going to be a good offensive and defensive rebounder. Like, he got there really, really fast. And then he stayed there, and he has not gotten a lick better for the last, 5 years. So, again, he's good for what he is. He's not a top 10 center in the NBA. He may not be a top 15 center in the NBA. He may not, I don't know. He's somewhere in that average range. Like, if you were to say, who is an average NBA center? Zubac is a guy that's going to come to mind. Maybe he's slightly above average, whatever you guys want to say. I like him. I just don't love him. Mo Bamba, another guy that was drafted really high in the draft, kind of hoping that he would be, another Magic's fix at center, because they've drafted 97 of those over the years, and still had to, get a guy in Wendell Carter Jr. that they did not draft to help fix that, but, it is what it is. He's a guy that has adapted over the years. He was just a guy that, could rim run, could finish lobs, and could block shots and rebound. That's all he was. Just your standard big boy 7'3" center. And now he has a three-point shot that is actually fairly good. He's not really allowed to take a lot of shots, unfortunately, but I think that given the right role, he could be really good. So maybe he will kind of grow into that here with the Clippers. And then there's Kai Jones. I don't know much about Kai Jones other than he did get into some trouble in Charlotte a few years ago for some video he made. I genuinely don't know anything other than that. I don't know any other details. Maybe he said something really stupid. I don't know what it was, right? So maybe somebody can let me know in the comments what he did. But I don't know much about him. He's getting a second chance here in L.A. I don't know. Maybe he'll make the most of it. And then just for the sake of fairness here, I do want to add Jordan Miller and Trenton Flowers onto the roster here. A couple of guys that, again, don't know much about. They are on non-guaranteed contracts. They will spend the majority, if not the entirety of the season, in the G League for the Clippers. Jordan Miller is an interesting one. He's listed at guard on ESPN and on Basketball Reference. But he's 6'9", so this is really, I think he is really more of a forward, but, I don't make the rules here. So maybe he is more of a forward, and they just don't have him listed as quite, something quite right there. But, yeah, and then Trenton Flowers, I don't really know much about him. We'll see how these guys develop over the course of the season, and if they end up playing any significant role for them, I just don't see it. All right, now we are going to get into 3 pros and 3 cons for the Clippers this season. The first pro that I have is dynamic scoring, and they have that in bunches, especially when healthy. Again, we know what James Harden is. He's not that same guy that's going to drop 35 points a night for you every single night and run an offense like nobody has ever seen. He's not that guy anymore, but he is a very consistent 18 to 21 points a night guy that's going to drop 6 or 7 assists, maybe even more, get some rebounds, get to the free throw line, finish some floaters. He's added that to his arsenal over the last few years, where he really just didn't have that previously. He did not have a floater game, before really he got to the Clippers, honestly, last year. We all know how good Kawhi Leonard is on offense, again, if he's healthy. I talked about Norman Powell earlier and how good of a scorer he is. And then, off the bench, obviously you got some guys that can hit some shots like Terrence Mann, Derrick Jones Jr. Zubac is a guy that can put in 10 or 12 points a night for you if you give him a big enough role on offense. Bones Highland is a guy that can get hot fairly quickly. So this is a team that has a lot of scoring. Again, especially when healthy. It all comes back to health, and we'll get into that when we get into the cons, of course. But, without all of their talent playing, it doesn't seem like it's quite as good, because it's just not. Depth only looks good when it's depth and not not all you have, right? If you have a very deep pocketbook but it's empty, yeah, the pocketbook's great if you had a lot of money in it, but you don't. So it's one of those things where that's kind of the situation here for the Clippers, where their depth is nice to have, but it's tough when you're not all healthy. But when they are healthy, and even when they're not healthy, they do have an abundance of offense on their team. Pro number 2 for the Clippers is tremendous overall depth. And an argument can be made that this should be pro number 1. I said at the beginning of this that this is possibly the deepest team in the NBA, and I meant it. The only team that I can think of that's deeper, really, is the Celtics, of course. So, looking at this team in terms of top to bottom, 1 through 15, they have a lot of quality guys that can step in and play big minutes and not really play poorly. Now, I'm going to get into later why that's actually not the best thing in the world to have just a bunch of guys that can play averagely or in an average way, I guess. I don't know if averagely is even a word. If it isn't, I just made it up today. But either way, this is a roster that has been constructed very, very meticulously and very smart, if I might add, because they have depth at just about every position. Yeah, their 3 is not the deepest position on planet Earth, but Kobe Brown could develop into a guy that could play the 3/4, and then obviously Kawhi Leonard is a guy that plays the 3/4 if he's healthy. So, they do have a lot of guys at other positions that can slide into that 3 spot. And, maybe when Kawhi comes back, it's one of those situations where Derrick Jones Jr. maybe comes off the bench, and, Norman Powell slides down and plays the 3, and then Terrence Mann plays the 2, and then now you've got several guys that can play that 3 position that are on the bench that are really good for you. So we'll see how that ends up kind of developing as the season goes along. Obviously, right now, the way that they're playing is not how they want to because Kawhi's out. So, yeah, tremendous overall depth. That is arguably the very best that this team has to offer. And pro number 3 is this season they have an influx of new energy for multiple reasons. Number 1, obviously the new guys that they brought in. They brought back Nicholas Batum, who is another guy, by the way, that could play the 3 or the 4. Now that I thought about it, brought back a guy like Nicholas Batum, who the city loved, the team loved, the coaches loved, and they didn't want to let him go, but they had an opportunity to get a guy that they thought could help bring a championship there in James Harden, so they traded him away. But they get him back now, and so obviously that is huge. A guy like Derrick Jones Jr., who has not won a championship in his career yet, but he just went to a finals with the Mavericks last year, and he is a guy that is perfect for what they need. They need more defense. They need some more shooting and some offensive ability outside of their main scorers. So this is a guy that is perfect for them. And of course, the big thing is they just got a brand new stadium. They just moved out of the Staples Center or the Crypto Center now, and they have a whole new facility with all different just crazy boards, and it's bananas. If you guys haven't seen videos of it, it's pretty cool. If you guys haven't seen a game, it's actually really, really nuts. So yeah, this city, this team has a lot of energy and a lot of hype surrounding it, and I think that could definitely be a good thing for them. And moving on to the cons. So this is where we talk about the bad things about the Clippers. Con number 1 is lack of defensive versatility in their starting 5. Now, when Kawhi is there, it's no doubt he is supremely defensively versatile. We all know that. It would be dumb for me to say otherwise. But let's go through the other ones. James Harden, not a good defender at all, right? Terrence Mann, he's fine, but he may not start when Kawhi Leonard comes back. So that would mean Norman Powell would start, and if that's the case, he's not a good defender either. Derrick Jones Jr., he's a good defender. I'll take that. Kawhi Leonard, good defender, we all know. Zubats, not really a good defender. So that means that 3 of your 5 best players, arguably, we can argue Terrence Mann in there, but the semantics between Terrence Mann and Derrick Jones Jr. being in the starting lineup when they're fully healthy, I would actually say doesn't matter because both of them are good defenders, so the point is still the same. 2 good defenders versus 3 bad. It doesn't really matter either way because Norman Powell's staying in there unless they both start and Norman Powell goes to the bench, which I would find silly, but maybe they'll do that. I don't know. So let's go with 2 good defenders out of the 5 positions, right? Those 2 guys, very versatile. Jones can guard 2 through 4 pretty easily. not really great at guarding fives, but he can do it athletically depending on who the five is. If it's a smaller five like an Xavier Tillman or a Grant Williams or something like that, that's like not super gigantic in stature, he can hold his own fairly well. But if it's a guy like somebody on his own team, like a Mo Bamba or a Joel Embiid, somebody that's just enormous, he's not gonna do well. But they don't have a lot of defensive versatility outside of Jones, outside of Leonard. And when Leonard's not in the starting lineup, by the way, so you're starting Terrence Mann, you're starting Derrick Jones Jr., that's great. You got two good defenders, not great defenders. There's not a lot of defensive versatility on this team, okay? And then you go to the bench. Nicholas Batum, without question, great versatile defender. You needed to bring him in off the bench. PJ Tucker doesn't really play, but when you do bring him in, you don't really worry about his defensive versatility either. Bones Highland, boy, that's rough. Mo Bamba, boy, that is rough. There's a reason why he hasn't played much, guys. It's not his offensive ability. It's not his rebounding. It's the fact that he cannot defend in space. And in today's NBA, you have to be able to defend in space, or you're not going to survive. We can go down up and down the list, right? Amir Coffey. No. There's just a lot of different guys on this team that are not versatile defensively. But specifically that first group, right? That first starting five that you're throwing out there against teams like the Warriors, teams like the Celtics, teams like the Lakers, teams like, the Spurs even that have a dynamic offense. Teams like Houston that don't really have a lot of defense, but they do have an abundance of offense. Teams like the Thunder, right, that are just going to run up and down the floor and drop 130 points on you. Or teams like the Celtics that are ridiculous. Or teams like the Pacers that just run you up and down the floor until you're deadbeat tired and you can't think halfway straight. You're not going to survive playing 82 games when you don't have a really good defense, and the Clippers just don't have that right now. Con number 2 is injuries, but of course, I'm mainly talking about Kawhi Leonard. Guys, this isn't a secret, okay? The biggest factor in the Clippers not winning a championship over the last handful of years is not because they keep choking, it's not because they're not good, it's not because their coaching is bad, it's not because their roster's not good enough, it's because Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, formerly, before he left, could not stay healthy consistently, okay? This isn't a mystery. This isn't controversial. That's just the way it is. And this year, it's looking like more of the same. Kawhi Leonard has not played a game. We don't know when he's going to play a game. We don't know if he's going to play a game. Who the heck knows what's going to happen with Kawhi Leonard? And the Clippers decided to extend him to a longer contract, despite the fact that he's missed more games than he's played over his previous contract that he signed with them. So I don't really know what the Clippers are thinking at this point, keeping Kawhi, but this is the line of fire that they have chosen to stand in. Okay? This is the rut that they have put themselves in. So they doubled down on Kawhi. They got him James Harden. They've got him some really good depth. As I said, their best thing is their overall depth for up and down, 1 through 15. We'll talk about why depth is not phenomenal right now, but regardless, Kawhi Leonard's health is, I would say, honestly the number one con on this team. Maybe obviously I put it at number 2 because I do think defense is more present right now, and even is a problem when Kawhi comes back. And so it's one of those things that even with Kawhi can let you down. So I did put it at number 1, but obviously the main concern is Kawhi not being there at all. So if they can't get Kawhi back, they have no chance of making it in the West because the West is crowded this year. I mean, even the teams right now that are not even in the play-in tournament are really good. Like Houston, Sacramento. We obviously had, the Pelicans had a lot of expectations coming into the year and unfortunately lost DeJounte Murray fairly early on. I was actually going to do an episode on them, this week, next week, whatever it was, until that injury happened. And so now I don't feel it very appropriate to do that because that team's not an accurate representation of what they are, right? So, yeah, I don't really know if it's going to work out. I just don't. And con number 3. I know this is going to seem like it's a bit of a oxymoron with the fact that I said that their roster is very deep. But they do have a lack of all-star talent on this team, right? So you look around the NBA, and there are teams that are 3, 4, 5 excellent players deep, right? These are guys that are, either all-stars, fringe all-stars, right? So on this team, you got Kawhi Leonard, who, when healthy, it's a big if, but when, if he's healthy, he is a top 15 player in the NBA, probably top 10, possibly top 5, okay? He's excellent. He is an all-star. We know what he is. James Harden. I don't know if he's an all-star at this point. I really don't. I don't know if he's an all-star caliber player right now at this point in his career. He was, certainly. But now, I don't really know. And then outside of that, nothing. Nothing. That is a very, very top-heavy team that, in terms of number one guy caliber talent. You take a look at, a team like the crosstown rival Lakers, right? You got LeBron, obviously all-star caliber player. You got Anthony Davis, all-star caliber player. D'Angelo Russell's not really an all-star caliber player, but the guy can put up 20 points a night. That is fringe all-star statistics, and there is nobody that can convince me otherwise. If you put up 20 points a night in the NBA, you are a fringe all-star. That's what you are. So you know what? I'm happy to even give Norman Powell a shout-out. Maybe he's a fringe all-star. I don't know if a guy coming off the bench can be a fringe all-star, but that's just me. Or mainly comes off the bench, of course, over his career. I don't know. Maybe he will. And then you got a guy like Austin Reeves, another guy who could drop 15 to 20 points a night if you let him. And if you gave him a bigger role, he could put in a lot more than that. So you've got 2 alpha dogs on that team and 2 pretty good offensive players that are fringe all-stars on the Lakers. And the Lakers are middle of the road in the West. Right? They're not a fantastic team. They're not like, whoa, way all the way up there. Let's go with another example if you don't like that one. The Memphis Grizzlies. Okay? The Memphis Grizzlies right now, their starting lineup, if and when everyone's healthy, is Ja Morant. We all know what Ja Morant is. When he's healthy, he's excellent. He's a top 10 player in the NBA. Desmond Bane, a guy who has been an all-star or fringe all-star every year. He can put up 25 points a night like that. Jaren Jackson Jr., not only won Defensive Player of the Year a couple of years ago, but also can drop 20 points a night as well. So this is 3 guys that are all-stars / fringe all-star guys. And to kind of keep that ball rolling, that depth on that team, beyond that, is pretty good. Yes, I know he's hurt right now, but you got a guy like G.G. Jackson, who last year, when everybody was hurt, was stepping up like mad. He was a guy that could put in 30 points a night if you gave him a big enough role. You slide him at that 3 spot, that's great. If not, then Aldama is another really solid piece. I'm not saying he's all-star caliber, of course, but he's a really, really solid piece. And then off the bench, Marcus Smart is there. Right? Marcus Smart is a guy that was Defensive Player of the Year a couple of years ago and has been an all-star previously and is still talented enough to be one. He's not putting up those statistics yet this year, but we'll see. So, point that I'm trying to make is, and by the way, again, Memphis, middle of the road again so far this year. I think they're the 8th seed right now. Obviously, it's early, but this is a team that, yeah, they might make the top 4, but they might not. You've got to have deep all-star talent on top of your depth. Biggest example, of course, is the Boston Celtics. We all know what the Boston Celtics have. They have 5 guys on their team that could theoretically be all-stars at any given point if they're given a big enough role. Their entire starting 5 could have made the all-star team last year. The entire starting 5 got votes to be all-stars last year. Derek White should have 100% been an all-star last year. The fact that he wasn't was a travesty of justice. But regardless, it is what it is. So, yes, I understand. I said and I mean that the Clippers are the very deepest team, 1 through 15, that is in the NBA, possibly. Again, outside of the Celtics. They're the only one that I could think of that might beat them. But on top, they don't really have a lot of talent, especially if Kawhi is hurt. If Kawhi's hurt, forget it. James Harden, at 37 years old or whatever he is your best player? Oh, that's not going to work. That's just not going to work at all. Norman Powell is going to be your best player. Listen, I like Norman Powell. I like him a lot. He's a great player. But if he's your alpha, you're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. You've got to have Kawhi Leonard, and you got to have all-star depth. That's why they had Paul George for so many years, because he was that number 2. He was that 1B. You kind of need a 1B, and the Clippers don't have that. They don't have a 1B, a 1C, a 1D, a 1Z. They got nothing. They've got Kawhi Leonard and James Harden at 37 years old. That's not really going to cut it, I don't think, guys. Okay, and then looking at the financial situation for the Clippers, right? So obviously we just talked about the Kawhi Leonard extension. He's not a free agent until 2027. He's 33 years of age at this point, and he's making $50 million a year, and he's just not cutting it. James Harden, $33 million for him is about right. It might be a little bit much, but it is what it is. Norman Powell's on a nice contract. And by the way, confirmation, PJ Tucker is still making $12 million a year at 39 years of age. Good for you, PJ. You're just killing it over there, buddy. Okay, so if we scroll down here, they're still paying Josh Primo. That's not great. So they are still way in the cap space, right? I know that they got rid of Paul George's contract, which helped. They were, I think, the most expensive team in the NBA last year. Maybe the Phoenix Suns were because they do have a lot of big contracts on the team, but the Clippers were one of the worst, right? And if you look at finances right now for this team, they are $36 million above the salary cap. I don't know why I couldn't really say that very well, but they are $36 million just way deep in it. Now, they're not as bad as the other teams that I've talked about. Not as bad as the Heat, not as bad as the Suns, because they do have some space in the first apron, which means they're not in the second apron just yet. So it's not like they're paying significant tax on this, but it does limit their flexibility to obviously get some guys. Now, they can get some guys on buyout markets. They can get some cheap free agents. They could also trade some guys, like maybe you trade Chris Dunn because he is on a 2-year with a player option, I want to say. Or maybe this year just isn't guaranteed. Whatever it is, he's probably on a player or a team option. Bones Highland is a restricted free agent, so maybe you want to keep him. I don't know how expensive he's going to be. But here's the problem, right? So if you scroll down here, obviously we talked about $36 million. They are minus $67 million next year, and that's before the year even starts. Okay, so they have no flexibility going into next year. Let's try and figure out what the deal is. So obviously Kawhi's contract gets a little bit more expensive by about $800,000. James Harden's contract gets a little more expensive by about by $800,000, by $3 million. For James Harden gets about $1 million more expensive. Zubac's contract takes a big leap. He signed an extension, takes a big leap, $7 million almost increase. $4 million increase to Terrence Mann. A little bit of an increase for Derrick Jones as well. A little bit of an increase here. And again, that does not factor in. What are you going to do for Bones Highland? What are you going to do with any of these two-way guys? I guess Kai Jones is on a two-way. I did not realize that. But again, you're looking at all of this and you're thinking, man, how in the world are the Clippers going to have any flexibility in future years? The answer is they are not right now, because they chose to re-sign Kawhi. They chose to keep Harden and sign him to an extension where he's paid $30+ million every year. It's ridiculous at this point in his career, but it is what it is. Clippers are not in a great financial spot right now, and it's going to be even worse next year. All right, folks, the time has come for me to give my doctor's diagnosis as to what's going to happen to the Clippers in 2024. I believe that Kawhi Leonard will play a total of 23 games for the Clippers in 2024. I believe the Clippers will only win 10 of those 23 games. I believe the Clippers will win 38 games in 2024/2025, and they will miss the playoffs entirely. And my Doctor's diagnosis is they should rebuild. Please, for crying out loud, Clippers, just rebuild already, okay? It didn't work. You tried. You did everything that you could. You got a whole new stadium for him. You did every single thing that you could to get this fan base riled up, to get the team riled up, to put yourself in a position to be great. You doubled down, and it just didn't work. Kawhi Leonard is not the answer. Not anymore. In 2019, I understand why you signed him. You just got super unlucky that his body immediately failed on him at every turn the second he got to LA. And I'm sorry that that happened to you. I really am. I wish it didn't. We're all worse off as basketball fans because we didn't get to see Kawhi Leonard have a long, lengthy, wonderful prime like we all wanted. But it's over, guys. He's 33 years old. He's not getting younger. His knees aren't getting any less powdery. His ankles aren't getting any less snappy. Unfortunately, his hamstrings just keep on popping. It's time, guys. After you don't make the playoffs this year, you gotta wave the white flag. You gotta trade Kawhi. You gotta trade James Harden. You have no draft picks for the next, 4 years or something. You got nothing. You got nowhere to go. You've got to start a rebuild. You got to. Otherwise, this team is just going to be mired in mediocrity for the next decade because you refuse to admit you were wrong. You were wrong. We all didn't want you to be. We all wanted you to get that championship. We all wanted you to break the Clippers' curse. We did. Just didn't happen. And it's time to admit it. All right, that is my diagnosis. The Clippers should rebuild. What do you guys think? Do you guys agree with my assessments? Do you guys have anything that you want to add to my pros and cons list? Anything that I missed? Anyone that I missed? Let me know in the comments section below.